Hi, welcome to another video by Geek97. In this video, we are going to learn about dependency injection in Angular or in general, working with services in Angular. I am Dhananjay Kumar. So dependency injection is a pattern which creates a loosely coupled application where application is highly scalable and application is suitable for test-driven development. So let us assume that you have various layers in your application such that UI layer, business layer, and database layer. If you are following inversion of control pattern or dependency injection pattern, in that UI layer needs business layer, but it would never create object of business layer directly. Instead of that, it would ask some other component of the application to inject that business layer dependency in the UI layer. As great Martin Fowler writes in his blog, that saying an application is special because it supports inversion of control is like saying a car is special because it supports wheel. Any good scalable application or application which is loosely coupled must have inversion of control or dependency injection. So to understand it, let us go here and let's say that we have two UI in our application. Let us call this as UI1. All right, and then I have another UI here and let us call that as UI2. In context of Angular, you can think this UI1 and UI2 as a component 1 and component 2. Now we have a business layer which is right here, and let's call it business layer. And then this business layer is talking to data access layer. And if it is an Angular application, then it could be talking to API. All right, so now what happens that you need this business layer to display data in the UI. So what usually you do, you take this business layer and creates object of this directly inside this UI. Now, since that object, let's call that object as BL01. Now that BL01, the object of business layer directly created inside UI1. Problem number one is this BL01 cannot be used inside UI2 because you have created that inside UI1. And second problem is this: the purpose of UI1, the purpose of that component is to render an UI. And while creating object of this business layer, for any reason, if that object creation fails, what would happen? This UI creation would also fail, and you may not want that. It may happen that whatever this business logic is returning to this UI is just only one portion of the UI and other portion are static. But if the responsibility of creating this object, creating the dependency object in the UI itself would make this business logic and UI layer very tightly coupled to each other. So these two problems, that this object of business layer is not reusable. And for any reason, if object creation inside UI1 fails, the whole UI would not render, are two major problems. But if you follow dependency injection, what you can do instead of doing this, let us say application will have one more application has one more, let us call it one more component, not that Angular component, but a part of the application. The whole purpose of this part is to create object and pass it to wherever it is needed. So now in this case, what would happen? Instead of, if UI need this business layer object, instead of doing this, what we have done here, it would go to this guy and say that, hey, can you give me object of BL? So this has information that if someone is asking object of BL, then what this has to do, whether it has to create new object or whether it has to use the existing object, all this information is there configured in this particular portion of your application. And depending on those configuration, when a UI layer would request this, it would create a new object or reuse the existing object and pass it on to UI layer. In that case, what would happen? This UI layer is not actually creating the object, and since it is not creating the object, it may that dependency will get injected when available to this UI layer, and only the portion where the that object is needed may get impacted if that dependency is not being injected correctly. Otherwise, the static portion, the passive portion of UI would not get impacted. In the same way, when UI2 is needed, so now you see that this is it needs that dependency. However, it is not directly creating that. It would also go to this guy, which is called DI container. So this guy is known as DI container, dependency injection container. And what it will do, it will go there, and now again, depending on the configuration, whether DI container would create a new object of business logic, or it would create reuse the existing object and return that to UI2. So depending on the configuration, it may happen the same object is being used in UI1, UI2, and further in UI3, and so on. And of course, this has some information here written in the DI container about business logic, that how this, if any UI or anywhere this business logic is dependent, and how this DI has to inject that. And in the same way, it would have this the object of DAL can be injected in the business logic, and so on. So if you look at here, what is happening, these are very loosely coupled part of application. This BL is dependent on DAL, but it is not creating object of DL directly. In the same way, UI is dependent on BL, but it is not creating object directly. And there is a part of application which is so responsible is to find the dependency and inject the dependency. It may use a new object, it may use existing object depending on the configuration. So more or less, this is called DI, dependency injection, and this is very popular. It is not part of only Angular. Any scalable application should have this pattern, and since it is very useful, since it is very required to create a scalable application and test-driven development application, and Angular is actually made for test-driven development. You can create the whole application and without having the UI, you can be very sure that, okay, business logic is working fine only on the basis of the test which you have written. So Angular is very much suitable for test-driven development. Hence, it supports DI in-house. You don't have, as a developer, you do not have to do anything extra for that. By default, Angular framework supports DI. So again, if we go back here, as it says, Martin writes in his blog, that saying an application is special because it supports inversion of control is like saying a car is special because it supports wheel. So any good application should support DI, DI as its first class citizen. All right, so now you understood a little bit about the DI. You can go on internet and it's completely theoretical and learn a lot about it. I prefer to use inversion of control and dependency injection interchangeably. Somewhere on some blog you may find that no, they say these two are two different things, but you can go and learn about those theories. Here let us focus, if you got little bit understanding about what is dependency injection, that how we can work with that in Angular. So in this video, what I'm going to cover how to create and use a service. Then we'll understand what is tree shakeable service and what is the concept of providers and injectors. You may have come across these two terms a million times, that providers, injectors, but these are very simple terms, and we'll try to understand them through the code. Then again, when Angular creates a new object and when it uses an existing one. So this third point is very important. If you go to our diagram, here you see that Angular will decide here that whether we need to pass a new object to the component, or whether it needs to create, has to create a new object to pass to the component, or whether it needs to use the existing one, and that depends on the configuration. So we will learn that also, and this is again very important if you are writing a scalable application or you are appearing for a client interview and job interview. They confuse you on this. Once we learn that, we would move ahead and understand different providers, and these are very easy. Then we would move to Angular 9 options. In Angular 9, we have root, any, and platform. We'll try to understand what is that. And then we'll see that how we can work with services in a lazy loaded module. So to start with, I have created an Angular application. In the Angular application, I have added two child components called child1 and child2, as you see on your screen. And then we are using that component inside app component right here in app child1 and app child2 being used here. Now to add a service in the application, what we would go, we would right here, let's go and use a Angular CLI command nggs, and you can give any name of the service. Ng is generate, AC service. Let me give the name of my service as log. So what it will do, it will create a service in the application. So here it has created service and a spec file for that. And we are back here and you can see that this log service has created. Now, if you look at this code, there are a couple of things. In line number 6, you can see that it is just a class. Then you can see that this class has a injectable decorator. And inside injectable decorator, you have a property which is provideIn, and by default that value is set to root. Now what is meaning of that, we would come to that later, but before that let us go ahead and write some code in this service and we'll try to use that. So here we created the service, and let's say that in the service we have a private static value count. All right. And then what we are doing here in the count, in the constructor, we are going to say that this dot count is equal to this dot count plus 1. Okay, so it's not this dot count, it should be, because it's a static, so we have to say log service.count is equal to log service.count dot plus 1, and then console.log log service.count. Now what I'm doing, you might have guessed as of now that I have just created a static variable, and inside the constructor I am increasing that value and printing that value. Now you know from your object oriented skill that this constructor would be called as many times object of log service would get created. So if application is creating object of log service twice, then this constructor would be called twice. If object of log service is being created 5 times, then this constructor would be called 5 times, and we would have 5 console.log. And if application is creating only one object, then this logs constructor would be called only once, and we would have only one console.log. Is it clear? And then let's say that we have one function here called say hello, and this takes a parameter name string, and then it just returns hello plus name. Very simple service, nothing fancy here. Only thing you should focus here that we are trying to print number of times the constructor of this service is being called. Now to use this, let us go to the component wherever we want to use it. So in the component child component, let's say it's the child component, child2 component, the syntax to use it, you have to inject that service. Now child2 component has a dependency on log service. So what we are going to do, how we are going to think that in our mind, visualize that in our mind, that since child2 has a dependency on log service, so we need to inject log service inside child2 component. And the syntax to do that is, we'll say private, let's say log service and log service. That's it. This is the syntax. If you follow that syntax, like in the constructor of the component or in pipe or of directive, if you follow this syntax where you create a private variable of the type service, service is a class which is decorated with injectable, which you can go and check here All right. So when you follow this syntax, what Angular does, Angular Angular assumes that child2 component has a dependency on log service, and Angular injects that in that component. All right. And let us say that in the here we have one message, and message is a string, and then we can say this dot message is equal to this dot log service dot say hello, and here let us pass it is child2, so let's pass child2. All right, and then we can go ahead and display this message in the child2 component template, and here we can say that instead of child2 works, just use interpolation and pass this message. So let's take this message from here, and we need to repeat the same thing in child1. We want to display that exactly in the same way. So here child1, we say message, and then we can take exactly the same code and pass it in child1 as well. So here in the child1, let's go and say message string pass inject log service. All right, and then here instead of child2, say child1. All right, so if we have created a service, we are using this service now to run this, call ng-serve. And here again, just to repeat, we created a service log service.ts, and inside this service, you can see that this service is this class is decorated with injectable, which makes this class as a service. And by default, there is a provideIn property which is set to root. We would come back to this. What does it mean? And we have created a static variable and just increasing that to check that how many times this constructor would be called, and then it has a simple say hello function. All right, so here we created that, compiled successfully, and let's go here. And here you see that we are getting hello child1 and hello child2. And in the console, if you look at the console, here you see that you are getting only one, which means the constructor of service is called only once, which means that only one object is being shared between hello child1 and hello child2. Right? Because if Angular is creating more than one object, then it would call that constructor here more than one time. And if it is calling it more than once, then of course this console.log would be printed more than once. But here you can see clearly it is only once being called. That constructor is being called only once of the service, which says that Angular has created only one object of the service, and that object is being used in hello child1 in child1 component and child2 component. So what message I am trying to give it to you here is that when you generate a service with Angular CLI command, and when the property is set to provideIn is equal to root, that means that by default, if you don't do any other changes, by default that is a kind of singleton service. Singleton service means Angular is going to create only one object of that service for the whole application, and the same object would be used everywhere you are using that service. Now, provideIn equal to root has two information. First, only one object would get created until you don't do something further, which I'll show you next. And second, this service is a tree shakeable service. If provideIn is set to root, means this service is a tree shakeable service. Tree shakeable means if log service is not used anywhere in the application, Angular would not keep this log service as the part of the final output bundle. This service would become tree shakeable, and it would only become part of final output bundle if it is being used somewhere else. Otherwise, Angular is not going to keep it as a part of the application. And that is very useful because that would reduce size of your application. So I repeat, if this provideIn is equal to root, means Angular is going to create only one object for the whole application. It goes onto the application module label. And second, this service is a tree shakeable service. So I hope now you understand what is meaning of provideIn is equal to root. All right, now what I'm going to do, if you have understood so far, what I'm going to do in the child1 component, let me get rid of this style URL, and here every component has something called providers property. Providers, there's a question mark after providers, means it is a nullable. You can pass it or you cannot pass value to it. We want to pass it here, so we'll say that, hey, providers, and then it takes an array, and here let's say log service. So what I have done in the component, child1 component, I'm setting the value of providers. All right. However, I have not done that for the child2. So now if we run this application and let us run this, you are getting exactly the same output, but what you should focus is right here in the console. You see that constructor is being called twice. That's why you are getting 2 printed. It means Angular has created 2 objects of log service. Now the message here is that even if you created an Angular service following Angular CLI, using Angular CLI command, and provideIn is equal to set to root, it does not mean that always this service is a singleton service. I have seen when I teach to people, when I consult to projects, that people assume that if provideIn is equal to root means always there would be only one object. No, by default it is only one object, but if you go and provide this again, like this, what we did in child1, Angular is going to create more objects for that. If you go again and provide it in the child2, then again Angular will create one more object. So the thumb rule is that Angular will create as many objects as many times this service is passed in the providers throughout the application, regardless whether it is set to root. All right, so I hope you understood so far now that what is the purpose of root. It makes a tree shakeable service. It creates a singleton service until you don't go and do something like that when you explicitly pass it to the component. Now you have 2 objects of the log service. The object which is created inside child1 would be available to child1 and all the child component of child1. I repeat, object which is created here inside child1 would be available to child1 and all the root component of child1, and the another object would be available to the whole application. Now next, let us do one thing. Let us go ahead and remove this provideIn is equal to root from the service. All right, so we have a service which is decorated with injectable, and we remove provideIn equal to root, and also we remove it from the providers array of the component. All right, now let's go and run the application. When we run this app, you see that here you are getting the error that no provider for log service and no provider for log service. We are getting that error twice because we are using log service at 2 places, child component 1 and a child1 component and child2 component. Now what is happening here, that it starts with this code. When you see this code, log service, this log service, it may appear to you that this log service is actually the name of this class, but in reality it is not the class, it is the token. That token which is being injected here. Actually it follows like this. So step 1, you injected the token, which we have done right here. All right. Then step 2, what happens, that Angular goes to DI container and finds how service is provided, how service for that particular token is provided. Whether Angular has to create a new object, whether Angular has to use existing object, and Angular has to create object of which class. Where is that information? Right now in our application, since we removed that from a for root of the service, we do not have that information here, and this service is nowhere provided, and hence Angular is giving us error in the step 2. So one option, you know, that you can go and pass it as provideIn equal to root, which will make a tree shakeable service and only one object would get created. Another option is you can go at the module level. Here I am going at the app.module, means this would be available throughout the application. And in line number 18, you see that you have providers array. In the providers array, you can go and pass this log service. When you did this, actually we completed this step 2. Now Angular knows that, okay, whether Angular has to create a new object, whether Angular has to use an existing object, or whether Angular has to create object of which class. And that information is given only by this one value when you pass to providers array. On running the application, you see that everything is back and there is only one object being created. And of course, if you want to create more than one object and for the a particular component and child you want separate component, you can again go and pass this information in the providers, and here you say that, okay, log service. And as it happened in the root option, Angular should behave exactly in the same way. You have one and two objects being created. Now you may have a question that, okay, what is the difference then when we pass that in the app module and when we pass it as the when we pass for root value provideIn is equal to root? So the answer of that is, before that, let me get rid of these providers, that when you pass in the log service here, when you pass this as provideIn as root, it is a tree shakeable. Means if this is not used, this service is not used anywhere, Angular is going to tree shake this service. However, when you pass this in the module, now this service is not tree shakeable, and this service, regardless whether this log service is used or not used, Angular is going to include that as the part of the final output bundle. So this is one thing you need to keep in mind. All right, so let us go back to step 2 again. Now Angular knows that, okay, it has to create a new object or use existing object and create object of which class, and then it will inject that dependency. So you may have a question that, hey, where you are providing that information, that create object of which class? By looking at this code, you may see that, okay, it is creating object of log service. But internally, actually this information which we are passing in line number 18 is represented like this, where you say that provide log service, because you are using that everywhere. So here we say that, hey, provide log service, and whenever log service token is provided, please use the class. In this case, we want to use log service itself. So when value of provide and use class is same, instead of representing it like this, you can just pass log service. Now again, if you go back here, you say that, hey, inject the token. So the token injected is here log service, which is actually equal to, you can think of this log service. And then step 2, it says that, okay, create object of which class, which information is passed here, that when this log service token is injected, please use object of log service class. And in this configuration, it means only one object would be created and that would be used. And if you run the application, you should get the output. Only one object is created and you are getting expected output, hello child 1 and hello child 2. So now you should understand that what is meaning of use class. Now you may have a scenario that, okay, can you give me more example when use class should be used? So for that, what I'm going to do here, let me create one more object, more service. I'll say nggs, and let us call that updated log service. It may happen that this updated log service is inheriting the log service. Here you can very much do that. It can inherit the log service, or it can be entirely a different service implementing an interface and all that. But it is going to have almost the same signature plus extra signature, etc. But here what I'm going to do, I'm going to just copy this log service from there in the updated log service, and I'll get rid of this provideIn equal to root here. And then in the updated log service, I'm saying that private count 0, and this is updated log, use updated log service dot count and updated log service dot count plus 1, and then just, all right. So here what I'm going to say hello and say hello name, updated. Again, just to give you an example that how useClass works, I'm doing this. In real-time scenario, you'll have real examples, which I'll just give you next, how you can use that. So here it is, I have one updated service. Now what I want, this updated service maybe is calling a new version of API, or it has some extra properties, let's say not hello, anything it has, and you want now this say not hello to available to everywhere where you're using log service and all that. So hello, not hello. All right, so here we have created a new service. Now see, in the real-time scenario, what would happen, that this new service should be created separately, unit tested separately. Now it is available. Now you want to use it. Now to use this here, what you want, that you want everywhere where you are using log service, instead of this log service class, you want to use updated log service class. And how you can do that is very simple. You want that, hey, wherever this log service is being used, please use the class updated log service, not log service. And just you have to change at one place. I changed it here in the use class, and let's go and run this. All right, so now what would happen, that Angular here will go, and this is injected log service. So step 1, injected the token log service. Go to step 2, Angular DI container, that how service is provided. So create object of which class, that information is available in the right here. You say that for log service token which is injected, please use class updated log service. Now everywhere you should have this updated log service created, and let's go and run this. And here we are saying that you have hello updated child 1 and hello updated child 2, and again only one object is being created. So if you have to change the class for a particular token, you can do that. Now you may have a question that, hey, can you give me a real-time example of that? I'll come and give you a real-time example, but before that, let us say that you added a new object component in your application, and that component is, let's say, child 3. So we added a new component. Now we want that for the new component, what do you want? So here you added a new component, and for the new component child 3, everything is going to be same like other child. But here what you want, here you want to use the token updated log service, not the log service. All right, so here you use that token updated log service. But in this case, what would happen, and let's go and display this message in the app child 3, and we can display this here. All right, and then take this child 3 component app child 3.t app child 3 and go to app component.html, and to use that, I'll use that right here like this. Now what is happening in the child 3 component, what I'm doing, I'm using a different token, and keep in mind this token updated log service is not provided yet. If you go, we have removed for the updated log service. If you go to definition, we don't have any providing information available here. And if we go to app module.ts, also that how that updated log service token would be used, is that information is not provided. That means that of course Angular would complain about this. So let's go and run this here, and here you see that it is giving you that no provider for updated log service. So you can go and again instruct Angular to create provider for updated log service token as well. So here we are saying that, okay, provide a new token, and we call this token as updated log service, and here use the class updated log service. Now when you use the class, now you have two tokens, log service and updated log service. But if you follow this use class and use class, they are going to create two objects, separate object, a separate object for log service token and separate object for updated log service token. And here you can see that you have hello updated child 1, hello updated child 2, hello updated child 2, and here you see that one token got created for the token log service and another object got created for token updated log service. So you can provide it. Now newly created object can have this token and they can have the object of updated log service, which is a latest version of service. Now what if you want to use the same object for both the token, for the log service and updated log service? In that case, instead of this useClass, you will use useExisting. Now when you say that, hey, whenever this token updated log service is provided, please use the existing token log service, and here we'll say that, hey, use a existing token log service. So what Angular will do, it will use the object for this log service provider. So here I repeat what Angular is doing for child 3. It will, for the child 3 component, it found updated log service. It would go to app.module. Here is a token provided. Then the syntax is useExisting, which means we are instructing that, hey, Angular use the object which is for the log service token. For the log service token, it is creating object of updated log service class, and the same object would be used. So here you are back, and here you can see that how it is creating for only one object, and that one object is being used for both the token log service and updated log service. So now you understand that how you can have single object for two tokens, and if you want to create separate object, instead of useExisting, you can create useClass log service. Now if you say that log service, then it will create object of log service class for updated log service token, and will find output here hello child 2. And I'm sure if you are following up to here in the video, you know that why you are getting the output hello child 2, because we are saying that, hey, give me for updated log service token, please give me object of class log service. Here you can pass ABC, any object you can pass it here. All right. So this is how you can you now understand that how useClass and useExisting works. Now let us see a real-time example of useClass. We are going to use this useClass feature of Angular dependency injection to handle the error globally in the application. For example, here let us go and put a button. And I have a button here which says send data, and on the click of this button, what we want to send data to API or something like that. So here it is send data function, and I have put this button in the app component. Now in the app component.ts, let us go and create this function. All right, and then here we are saying that this dot data is equal to this dot URL dot index of. Of course, line number 13 will throw error because value of URL is undefined, and we are trying index of method on undefined. So JavaScript is going to complain about that. One way to handle this error is that you can put it in the try catch and do that. But Angular has a error handler class, and that should able to handle this error. So let's see that what is happening. Now when you run the application, everything looks good. Hello updated child 2. We don't want that. That is actually child 3.component.ts, and it is child 3. All right, so let's go back to again this app component and run this. And here we are, everything looks good. Now we know when we click on this send data button that function would be called and it should throw us error. And here it is throwing us error that he cannot read property index of undefined. Now this error is brought to you by default error handler class of Angular. This error is good, but what if you want to have a uniform global error handling for the application? You don't want to use that error handler class which is given to you by Angular and want to use your own error handler class. And for that, let's say that how we can do that. So here what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new service, and let's say that this service is global error handler. I'm giving it name as global error handler. and this is created, and let's go and run this. So here we have global error handler class created right here, and we would say that okay, now what we want to modify that default error handler class. So for that, let's go and in the global error handler class, what we will do, we will extend that default error handler class. So for that, here I'm saying that okay, implements error handler, which is part of Angular core. All right, and this error handler has one method called handle error, and we can go ahead and say that hey, handle error, and this takes error. Okay, and here we'll just say console.log there is no error in my application. All right, so we are not doing just, we are consoling that. Keep in mind this console can go to the server, you can pass it to API, log the error to the service and all. But here I'm just trying to show you that what I have done, I have created a new service called global error handler, and which is implementing error handler. By default, this error handler is being used to handle error in Angular application, and we'll get rid of this provideIn route as well. All right, so now again, when you run the application, you see when you click on send data, you are getting an error that cannot read property index of undefined, and that is coming due to a default error handler. Now what we want, we don't want to use default error handler, and we want to use global error handler service. And now you should know the answer of that, what we need to do for that. For that, we will go to app-module.ts, and in app-module.ts, what we can say that hey, Angular, whenever error handler token is injected, please use class, and we created that class just now, global error handler service class. So please use this class for error handler token, and by default this error handler handles your exception in the application, but right now we are overriding that and saying that use global error handler service, which we just created, where whenever a error is encountering, what we are doing, we are just displaying this message, there is no error in app. So now let's go and run this application. Here we are, and when we click on send data, you see that that default error is gone and there is no error in app. That information is coming to you. And again, throughout the application, but if you want to use the default one, you can pretty much go and say that use error handler itself, and here it should use the error handler, which is the default, and you are getting this cannot read property index of undefined, but we want to use our error handler, and here we can say that use the global error handler service. Of course, in the global error handler service, you will not only print one information, you can use some third-party libraries like stacktrace.js and all, and using that you can, from here you can log this information to the server. You can handle at the application level what you want to do. So this is a real-time example of how this use class comes to the action. Other example is HTTP interceptor. Angular provides you a $HTTP service which is used to make an API call. If you want to override that and use your default class for that, you can again use this use class and create a new service and inject that throughout the application. So now I hope you understand what is the real purpose of this use class. You can use it for global error handling, you can use it for HTTP intercept, and of course you can use it for the versioning of your custom services which you are creating into the application. Besides use class and useExisting, we have useValue and useFactory. Now what useValue is used for, it is used to provide a value instead of object. So if you wish to provide a value wherever that particular token is injected, you should use useValue. So to understand that, let's say that in our application we have let's go and create a file called, let's say, value.ts, and in the value.ts, what I'm saying here, I'm just creating a injection token. So we'll say export const, and let's say this is a API key. You want to provide this API key as a value wherever it is injected, or in almost all cases throughout the application. So here we are saying that, hey, export constant API key, and this is going to be a new injection token. So here I have taken new injection. So here first import this. So we'll say that import injection token, and we want to import it from Angular code. So here we imported this injection token, and you can use this here as injection token, and that is of type string. All right. And then here you need to provide what is the purpose of this injection token. So here we are saying that API key for app. So API key for app. So here you created an injection token called API key, and we are going to use it to pass the value. All right, so here it is. Now to use that, let's go to app.component.ts. Let us say we want to use it in the component. So for that, in the child1 component, I want to use that. So what I'm going to do in child1 component.ts, right here, we'll say that after log service, that, hey, inject API key as a. So here you injected this API key. All right, and all right, and to use that, what I'm going to do here, let's say that I have API key as any here in the application, and then we are saying that, okay, this dot API key is equal to this a which you passed. And here in the child1 component, what we can do, let's go to the template of child1 component, and here let's say that after the message, just display that API keys, which is API key dot, whatever we'll pass from there, we'll try to display that. All right, so now we have injected this API key, but we have not provided it. So to provide it, let's go to the module label, and in the module we can say that, hey, right here, provide API key which we just created, and whenever this key is provided, use a value, and here is that value, and here we can say that use value, in that you can pass whatever you want to pass. Let's say that we are saying that API key is 1 2 3 4 5 6. All right, so here you are passing this API key, and then you can right here you are, if you print this, you can print this console.log this .api key, and that should be available to you right here, and that is being passed as a value, not as an object. And also here you can say API key dot, and from there, if you look at there, we are passing this API key, so that should be API key dot API key, because that's an object and the property. All right, so here we are compiling that application, compiled successfully right here, and you see that you have 1 2 3 4 6 being passed. So use value is actually used to pass a value and inject a value wherever you need it. Here we injected in the child1 component. You can go and inject it anywhere you want. So let's say that you want to inject it in child2, you can inject it in the child2 as well. So let's go to child2.component.ts, and right here we can just modify this constructor, and then here we can say API key is of type any. All right, so here in the child 2 also now that got injected, and it says that this API key is not available, so say that API key from the value. All right, and then inject it from Angular core. All right, so here we are, it's compiled successfully, and now for the child 2 also you see that you are getting the output API key. For child 1 also you are getting the output API key. So in this manner you can use useValue to inject a value in the application. So we learned about useClass, we learned about useExisting, we learned about useValue. Fourth option is useFactory. useFactory allows you to return an object, like which class objects should be created from a function. The factory function can have a business logic, and on basis of that Angular would decide whether it has to create object of log service or whether it has to create object of updated log service. If you see in useClass and useExisting, you are directly passing it and object of that particular class is getting created. So here what I can do, I can go and create a factory method. So let's say that I have a value called here let config value, and that is set to 9. It can come from a application level JSON file or anywhere, but here just for the demo purpose I'm hard coding that. Then I have a function where get log object, and what this function does, this function have a very simple business logic which says that, hey, if this config value is equal to 9, then please return me object of log service. All right, otherwise return me object of updated log service. So what this factory does, that it returns object of log service if config value is equal to 9. It returns object of updated log service if it is not equal to 9. So here it is, let's say that by default it is equal to 19. So we are expecting that value of updated log service should return. And what we will do, wherever this log service is provided, what we want, we don't want to use this useClass. Now we want to use either log service or updated log service on basis of some business logic. So instead of useClass, we would say that useFactory, and here you need to pass name of the factory, which in this case get log object. So here now you see that for the log service it will call this factory function, and right now it will return us object of updated log service, and that object would be used for updated log service as well, because that is using useExisting and token is log service. So on running, you see that here you are getting hello updated child 1, hello updated child 2 and child 3, because updated log service is being called from the factory method. If you go and modify this, let's say that we modify this to 9, now what would happen, that this function would return us object of log service, and that should get reflected everywhere. And here you see that you are getting output from log service, not from the updated log service. So useFactory allows you to create an object depending on a business logic, what you see here. useValue allows you to inject a value, and useClass allows you to create an object, and useExisting allows you to use existing object of a already existing token. So these are the purpose of these 4 providers in Angular. So far we are working with a single module, all these services, concepts of provider, injectors, for root, provideIn is equal to root, or useFactory, useClass, useExisting. We are working with a single module. How, when we create a service, works with multiple modules. So for example, we created a service here, and that service is provided in application module level. Then how it would be provided inside the feature module, how it would be provided inside the module which is eagerly loaded, how it would be provided inside the module which is lazily loaded. So let's see that how that works. So to do that, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to add a module in our application, and we'll say nggm, and let's say that module name is feature. So adding a new module in the application, once that is added, say nggc, and then call that component as a feature as well, and say that module is equal to feature. So it will create a module called a component called feature and add it inside feature module. Here it is added, and let's run this. All right, and then in the application you can see that we should have here a feature module got created. So inside this we have a feature module. In the feature module here we have a feature component created. So go to definition, here we have a feature component. Feature component is going to be exactly like any child component where we are using that. So let's see this. Let us take this API key and put it inside the feature.component.ts. All right, let's say that we don't want this to inject the value. Just to keep it simple, we'll work on a log service. And here it is, and we'll saying that import log service from log.service, and then this A is not needed. Let's get rid of this, and here this dot message, so we need a message of type string. All right, and then log service, and here it is feature module. All right, and let's go to app.module.ts. Inside app.module.ts, what I'm going to do, just to keep it simple, let's say that use class, and in that use log service. All right, so here it is. We are saying that for log service token, for updated log service token, use class log service, and here use existing log service token. All right, and then in the feature component, just to its HTML, here we can say that, okay, display the message. All right, last but not least, what we need to do, we need to take this app feature and we need to use that. So we can use that inside app component, and right here in the app component.html, just after child3, let's add app feature as well. And also one thing you need to do is take this feature component and go to feature.module.ts and make sure that you have exported that as well. So here we'll say export, and we need to export this feature component. All right, so here we have added a module which is eagerly loaded, and we are using the log service which is provided at the application module level right here, and using that in the application. So here it looks, let's see that if it is compiled successfully, it says that error occurs on a template of this. So let's say yes, and again try to run this. And here if we are doing any mistake, one thing probably we need to do is in the app.module.ts, we need to make sure that whether feature module is imported or not. So we'll go here and import that. So say import that feature module, and we got to import that here, and this feature module is imported at the application level. All right, so here it is imported, and let's see that whether it's compiled successfully, and our application is compiled successfully, and then here run this, and we should see that hello feature module, hello child3, hello child2, you are getting expected output. And right here in the module, if we go and change from this log service to updated log service, you'll find that is available in the feature module as well, and here you are getting this. One thing you should focus here in the console, that only one object is being created. So if you are injecting a service at the application level and that service is being used in the feature modules which are eagerly loaded, which are loaded not in the lazy loaded manner, here you see that the same object being used in the application and all the features module. Now let us see that how we can work with lazily loaded module. If you do not understand what is a lazy loaded module, means this feature module which we just added and working on, what Angular will do, Angular will make this module part of the application from the beginning, because this module is eagerly loaded. If a module is lazily loaded, it means that that module would be downloaded into the browser only user is using that, and when user is using that particular module. So to understand it, let's go back here and first add few modules in a lazy loaded manner. So what I'm going to do, first adding a module here called customers. It has its own routes and it is added to app.module. All right, so here we added one module. Once that is added, then go ahead and add one more module called orders. So here we are adding one more module called orders. This is the Angular CLI command to create modules. All right, so once we added that, here you can see in the application, let's go to the application. You see that you have orders module added. In the orders module, you have order component.ts, you have order routing module.ts, and order routing module.ts has information about that which components should be loaded to the default of this module. In the same way, here it is exporting and doing all those things. Same way you might find that customers module being added. It has its own route module and all that. Since they are the child module, here it is for child is being used for the customers, and for child is being used for orders as well. Now if you go to app routing module.ts, here you see that information being added for those two lazily loaded paths. So here we are saying that, okay, so you see that here Angular has added it for you. It says that if base URL/customers, then load children, and this is the syntax to create a lazy loaded module. Load a module in a lazy loaded manner. Say load children and then use the import statement to go to that path, and then it is successfully, if that promise is success, then it is loading that module. Same for the others module. Here we can go and add one default path to the application, that if none matches, then it should go to a default path. So here I am, and then I'll just say that, okay, add a default path for the full. So if none of these URL matches, it will go to a default route. So here you see that we have added two modules, and those modules are loaded in a lazy loaded manner inside the app module. Now to do that, let us go to app module and first add a few buttons, and then on that button we will try to load these modules. So to that, let's go to app.component.html, and right here let's get rid of this scene data. Okay, let it be there, and here I'm adding two buttons. So here we are having two buttons, which says that three buttons actually, that if customers button is clicked, then base URL/customers should be loaded. If orders button is clicked, then base URL/orders should be loaded. Otherwise this on home it would go to the default route. So here we added that, and we want to load that particular modules, and for that we need to add a router outlet. So let's go and add that router outlet. So what I have done right now has nothing to do with dependency injection services, just we are trying to load a module in a lazy loaded manner. So here it is. Let's go and run the application. So here I am, and I'll say that ng-serve. I just ran few commands, and here on the button we'll just load that modules component inside this router outlet. And every module, if you go here, has a default component. So go to app routing.module.ts, and here you see that if path is default, then it will load orders component, and same you'll find the configuration for customers as well. Here you can see that. All right, so here compile successfully and run the application. So here we are running the application. Let's go to first console. Everything is working as expected. So let's go to first network, and then again refresh it. So here you see that many files being downloaded here. Now please notice here you have runtime.js, polyfill.js, style.js and all. Now when I click on these customers, you see then this customer module.js got downloaded. The URL is changed on the top, and here you get output customer works. When I click on orders, then this orders module.js is downloaded and URL is changed. So it is these modules are downloaded when you are using that, and this is called lazy loaded modules. So now we saw that we are able to lazy load customers module and orders module. Now let us see that how we can use login service inside these modules. So here first modify the log service. What I'm going to do in log service, that if you remember we had a API key, and then we are providing that here in the app.module.ts, which has a API key and the name of the module. So the idea is we are going to have different API key for different modules, at least for different lazily loaded modules. So here for API which is available for app module has this value and module name is app. So first what we are going to do, the log service, first inject that API key here, and we can inject that using inject as you did in the components. And here you can say inject this API key. All right, I can give any name. I'm giving it name as API key, and let's say that this function has one. This service has one function called get API key, and this, so now it should be fine. Here we injected this, all right, and then we are returning this. What I have done in the child component, I am making call to that get API key function, which we just added to log service, and then setting this value to this API key, and then on the HTML we are displaying that API key and module name. So right now the output should more look like this. Here you have key and module name app. All right. Now what if here we want to have the same for different modules? So let's go here in this and just copy this from here, and let's go to this orders module. In the order module we have this order.component.html. We'll just put it here. Here message string log service, saying log.service, and then let's call this as orders, and it has get API key, and you are and we need to display that, and we can display that right from here. So take this from here and go to orders.component.html and just paste that code. So here we pasted .code that is for orders, and the same way take this and go to our other lazy loaded module, which was the customer. Here in the customer, we'll go to customer module and first show it, paste it here, and then again take this. All right, and then from child component we can take this from here, and for customers also in the TS we can put it here. All right, so nothing fancy here. It is both lazily loaded customers and log service is making call to the log service API, which is available provided at the application level, and here we can call this as customer, and let's see that what output we are getting. First, see that is compiled successfully, and we are here getting for this module name app. And when we click on customers, you see that a customer is now displayed, and that also has the same key and module name available, of course, because we are passing the same for the API key token. And for the orders also, when we click here, it has changed to hello orders, and it has the same key 1 2 3 4 6 and app. Now this is good if this is our requirement, and you see that even if it is a lazy loaded module, you don't have to do anything extra for that. Now let us assume that for a customer we want to pass different value, and for orders we want to pass different value. What we will do? So of course, let's go here in our application. First go to the module here, and in the module we'll say that let us take this provide API key, and you would say that I'll pass it at the level of we'll pass it at the level of in the module. So here we will go, let's say that in the module for order, and here we can say providers, and then we can do this. So here we say that, hey, provide that API key, and here we say that this key is 9 and this is a order module, so pass that as order. All right, so we can do this very much. And in the same way, we can go to customer module, and here also we can say that providers, and we can pass that. And here is value, and let's say this value is 987654321, and we are inside the customers model. So this is a customer, here the module name is customers. Now let's see that what is happening. So here we are, and back to application, everything looks good. So here it is coming 1 2 3 4 5 6 module name 1, and one object is being created as you see here. Then when I click on customers, you see that now still this customer also has this same module name passed app. The orders also has the same module name passed app. Now the one step left is it is still using the same log service. So for that, what we can do, we can come here and say that use this API key useValue, and also besides this, please use log service. Here we are saying that use log service, and then in the same way we go to order modules here, and we would pass that log service. So that it will create a new instance of log service, and then it will pass this in the newly created instance for this particular module. All right, so here we are, and let's go back to here. It's 1 2 3 4 5 6 app, one object created. When you click on customers, here you see that for the customers now you are getting different value, but a new object created for log service. Now you have two objects, one for the whole application, one for the customers module. When you click on orders, again the third object got created, and this third object is now being used, and you are getting this order. Again, go to customers, the same second object would be used for the customers module. Go to orders, the third object will be used for the orders module. And if you go to home, the same first object would be used for the whole application and the newly created and the modules which are eagerly loaded. All right, so this is actually we are able to achieve what we wanted to achieve. You see that we are able to see that we are able to provide that, and everything is working fine. And what we just done, we just injected the log service here. Now the problem with this approach is, and this is the way we used to do before Angular 9, and the problem with this approach is this log service is now not tree shakeable. Even if in this order module this log service is not used, Angular is going to create object of this. Keep in mind, since you have passed into the providers, as we discussed earlier, this is not a tree shakeable. So to make it tree shakeable, what we need to do, it will make this log service not tree shakeable. And to make it tree shakeable, what we'll do, we have to first remove it from the providers of everywhere. Here also we remove it from the providers. But if we do that, and in the app module also, we need to get rid of this from here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get rid of, I'll say that for updated log service, use updated log service, and here I'm going to get rid of this provide, because we want to make it as a tree shakeable object, tree shakeable service. For that, we got to come back to this log service.ts, and here if you go to the beginning of our lecture today, and here we would have to say that provide in at the root level. If we provide in at the root level, then see what is happening. It says that is not here. It should, we are passing at the root level. It should give us, let's go and try to run it again. So here we are running this application again. All right, so here we are saying that, hey, provide in is equal to equal to root. All right, and let us wait it for successfully compiled. All right, so here it is compiled. Let's go back to our application again and run this. So here we are getting two module name app. When we click on customers, you see that if we providing at the root, again you are getting the same configuration because there is only singleton object of that is created as we discussed earlier, and it will not create new object. However, our requirement is to get separate value for separate lazy loaded modules here, not the same value, and you can do that by changing this value from root to any. If you change this to any, what would happen? Angular will create new object for each lazy loaded modules and plus the application module. So it will create 3 objects here, and we are back here, and let's run this application again. You see one object got created. We are getting 1 2 3 4 6 customers. You are getting here customers, another object got created, and orders, third object got created. And if you use any, it is tree shakeable. So you can achieve that using provide also, but that is not tree shakeable. If you use it any, it is tree shakeable. So what any provide in any enables us that it will create separate object for all the lazy loaded modules, and a single object would be shared between the application and all the eagerly loaded modules. So in this video, we almost learned everything we need to know about services and dependency injection in Angular. I hope after watching this 70 minutes of video, now you are well informed about what is the purpose of root, what is the purpose of any, when to use useClass, useValue, useExisting, useFactory, how to work with lazily loaded module and services, etc. Once again, thank you so much for watching this video.